Joining me today from Vienna, Barry Rosen, former Iran hostage. You are most welcome on the Capital TV show. We are following up with your hunger strike. You stopped after 5 days, but you tweeted and you said, I'm starting a hunger strike this week in Vienna, 41 years after my release, to demand the release of all hostages being held by Iran. And you said they must have the freedom before we make any deals with this regime. What are your demands exactly?
Well, my principles are this. I call on Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, to release all the hostages immediately. Not only American hostages, but all European hostages, which number from about a dozen to 20. It depends upon how they're detained. And if they don't release the hostages, then I call on the West not to agree on any nuclear deal with Iran. Moreover, if there is an agreement between the United States and the EU and E3, and if Iran takes hostages again, then the deal should be null and void.
So is there any promises from Robert Maris, the US special envoy to Iran, after you met with him and you said that the release of the hostages is necessary for any deal? Is there any promise?
Well, the special envoy, Robert Malley, said in this interview that he could not see an agreement with Iran without a release of all the hostages. Now, I don't know exactly how that may be done, but I do know that the special envoy wants to see these hostages released too, besides an agreement with Iran. I think the real problem is not just the American hostages, but all the Europeans who are held hostage too, European Iranians. And I've been talking to all the European negotiators, the French, the head of the EU, and the German negotiators, and I'm asking them and calling on them to make certain that there is a multilateral approach with Iran, not a bilateral approach. I want all the hostages, every one of them, released.
How do you see the world community support to your hunger strike? And there is others who still on this strike. How do you evaluate this support?
I think I've struck a chord with many people, not just the hostages, but the hostage families. In point of fact, it's interesting. I've gotten actual audio messages from the hostages who are in Evin prison in Iran, and they are supporting me 100%. And they asked me to continue the Free the Hostages movement because they feel that they're not being heard in their countries.
You spent 444 days in this prison, and what was your case? What they accused you of, and how do you feel about the hostages? They are still there.
Well, I was a U.S. diplomat in Iran in 1979, and I was taken hostage along with 51 other of my colleagues. Iran doesn't believe in international law. Its hostage diplomacy started almost 41 years ago, when they took me and my colleagues hostage. How could a government ever take diplomats hostage? And this is going on for more than 40 years, and the world has not held Iran's feet to the fire. I think because of the world community is so weak in terms of its reaction to Iran, Iran seems to think that it can do anything it wants at any time, blackmailing countries by using hostages as bargaining chips.
Do you think in this situation that the negotiations in Vienna are gonna be successful?
It's hard for me to tell. I mean, I don't think even the negotiators know if it will be successful. One day they think there's something going on, another day there's not. But it's coming to a point where the Iranians either agree or disagree. And then from there on, who knows what will happen. But I did, when I talked to Special Envoy Malley, he did say to me, no matter what happens with the JCPOA, he will strive to free the hostages. So it could be a separate deal. But I see that there is, I'm not saying it's a promise, but he says that he will do his best to get all the hostages free.
There is a possibility to have another separate deal, you mean?
Yes, yes.
You asked before, why did the US unfreeze funds to let South Korean pay Iran's $18 million in owed UN dues to restore Tehran's vote in the General Assembly? So can you elaborate more? I'm
just saying Iran doesn't need American money to pay its UN dues. It must have been, it's an inducement for Iran to negotiate. But, you know, that I still think it's foolish. You know, let Iran pay its own bills. It has enough money to do that. If it can't pay its UN dues, then it should leave the UN. It doesn't believe in the UN anyway. It only uses it for propaganda. Yeah, you were against the visit or the presence of President Raisi in the UN Assembly, the latest meeting. Absolutely. Mr. Raisi, Ibrahim Raisi, was the chief judge in Iran, but even earlier that he executed 5,000 Iranians who were against the regime, and he executed them on the orders of Ayatollah Khomeini. So his hands are full of blood, and he should be in the International Court of Justice in The Hague as a criminal. Mm-hmm. How do you evaluate the human rights level in Iran? And is there any human rights organizations that you are in touch with? The human rights level in Iran is atrocious. It's one of the worst human rights violators in the world. I'm in touch with other human rights groups. I worked for Hostage Aid Worldwide, which is an organization that tries to assist hostages. It's just, Iran is not part of this, of what I would call the civilized world. It has its own rules and regulations. It wants to be a normal country, but yet on the other side, it has this revolutionary fervor with revolutionary courts, Islamic Revolutionary Guards, and an intelligence ministry that puts people away in prison. Not only hostages, but there are people, journalists, authors, all sorts of people who want to speak out, and they're arrested and they're sent to jail. And many of them are sent for years and years and years without any justice and without any legal assistance at all. Mr. Rosen, do you think that beside the freeing the hostage, don't you see that funding terrorism is something that a thing that has to be in the negotiation? No deal without any support to the idea to stop funding terrorism, especially the Houthis, Hezbollah, and all these proxies of Iran in the region. They are threatening USA allies too. I decry what Iran does with the Houthis, with Syria, with Hezbollah. All that is an abomination. But I think to a large degree, the West wants to stop Iran from enriching uranium and developing a bomb. For the West, it's the priority. After that, then there will be further negotiations about all the other issues that Iran violates. Look, its approach to ballistic missiles is another issue. Iran can reach very far. It doesn't need an air force anymore. It doesn't need much. It can use its ballistic missiles, and it has been doing that to kill people and to actually hurt other countries. Mm-hmm. Which is very bad. Mr. Barry Rosen, I thank you so much for being with us, and we support you. We wish that you reach your demands, and this demands will be successfully realized. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Shukran.
Hey, Maria Malouf here. Please click to like and subscribe to Maria Malouf TV YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.